Welcome to the Windows and Computer channel, and this is one video in a part 3 of the decade of Windows. Yes, we are going to be in 2020 in a few weeks from now, and that means we just passed 10 years running Windows. And what was the key Windows versions in this decade? Well, we started the decade with Windows 7. Of course, we started the decade with a lot of people on Windows XP that was released the earlier decade. But Windows 7 was new, and it actually arrived on October 22nd, 2009 for regular users. So this was interesting because Windows 7 was actually a new operating system. It replaced one Windows version that was probably the most hated of all, Windows Vista. And the development of Windows 7 actually is based a lot on Windows Vista. A lot of people, when they got to Windows 7, said, oh man, it's so much better. Well, it was a tweaked Windows Vista in reality. They had fixed the major flaws of Windows Vista and had kind of made it, a little more fluid and faster operating. And of course, Windows 7 was the start of the decade, the Windows operating system that started. It was like, I always say this because it's funny, like every operating system. Most people that went to Windows 7 were from Windows XP. And of course, Windows 7 at the start was hated because Windows 7 had several changes that rendered a lot of Windows XP software kind of obsolete, and even a lot of devices. But also, one of the biggest problems is that Windows 7 was released many years after Windows XP. So Windows XP users had old devices very often, old software that they were actually hanging on to. And Windows 7 was not compatible with those older technologies. It was something that, as a tech guy, I lived through this. The fact that people often had to buy a new printer or, a new webcam or whatever because the operating system didn't accept the older ones. And people didn't understand that. So at the beginning, it was not really liked. Also, a lot of people were a little kind of lost with Windows 7. I have always wondered why, because I always thought it wasn't that different from Windows XP. But, people are easily lost, basically. And what happened is, of course, this became the dominating operating system of the decade. We can actually say that in this decade, the biggest version that dominated a big part of the decade was Windows 7. And even as of November of 2019, the latest numbers we have is roughly 28% of traditional PCs are still running Windows 7. So that tells us that it's still there. I mean, it's still a lot of usage, and even in certain countries around the world, it's still above 50% of what Windows versions are. So, of course, the support lifecycle is 10 years for Microsoft, and that means that this beloved Windows 7 is, of course, going to be retired in on January 14th, 2020. It enjoyed a service pack, which was released in 2011 to the public. On February 22nd, 2011, the Service Pack 1 was actually updating the system to add several little things, including Advanced Vector Extension, AVX, a 256-bit instruction a set extension for processors, and all sorts of little things for newer technologies, of course. And it was really then probably became quite loved over time. It was very stable. It was pretty good, and it had a lot of nice features. Actually, it introduced aeroed glass effect, which kind of looked like frosted glass effect, if you want, and so on. So it was at first a little rough on the edges for users, but it became a very, very good operating system, and most people actually loved that operating system a lot. So that's the first version that we started the decade with, at a time when, of course, in 2010, still a lot of people were using Windows XP, and a lot of people were happy to go from Windows Vista to Windows 7. One little note, it was the first version of Windows that actually enjoyed what we called a technical preview in advance. You could actually, it was not an insider program, it was not called like that, but you could actually test Windows 7 and its technical preview form a little bit before it actually was released. And this made it the first version that actually people could actually test before the Windows 7 was officially released. It also enjoyed, and probably Microsoft was a little, tried to have people move on because of the Windows Vista fiasco. They had also asked if anybody pre-ordered Windows 7 many months in advance. It was actually sold for a very small price. And I don't remember what price, but I know it was a very big discount. Instead of paying the usual $139, for example, for the license and the copy of Windows 7, it was really, really discounted to a very low price, like $25 or $35. I don't remember exactly. Probably because Microsoft knew that people were unhappy with Windows Vista. So the first operating system of the decade, and the last one to leave in terms of support, ending in a month now, Windows 7. If you enjoy our videos, please subscribe, give us thumbs up. Thanks for watching.